this computer. All right. Hi, folks. So I am doing something a little bit different here. I'm with Tim Lebbon, who is a New York Times best-selling horror, thriller, and fantasy writer of over 45 novels, including several collaborations with Christopher Golden, as well as dozens of novellas and hundreds, probably thousands of short stories, right, Tim?
Probably hundreds. You know, if I did go into my attic a few years ago and dug out a box of the old short stories I was writing 25, 28, 30 years ago.
He's written tie-in novels with the Alien, Predator, Hellboy, Star Wars, and Firefly universes. His novel The Silence was made into a Netflix movie where he even had a brief appearance as a bloody corpse.
Yeah.
His novella Pay the Ghost was a 2015 movie starring Nicolas Cage. He's won 4 British Fantasy Awards, a Bram Stoker Award, and he's just been nominated, and you probably have a room full of just your awards.
I got a few bits and pieces on the shelf behind me. Yeah, you know.
So yeah, Tim, thanks for doing this. I mentioned before we had started that I had done some Instagram live ones and decided to kind of switch it up a little bit. So I knew that when you had your book come out, for some reason I was like, you know what, I haven't talked to Tim in a while. I figured it'd be good to kind of do a quick chat. And so you fit me into your time, so I appreciate it. And of course, the main reason we're going to talking about is his book here, Run, Walk, Crawl, which when this came in the mail, my wife had opened it and she was like, getting fit in your 40s. You're not 40 yet. Now I'm gonna be 40 soon. But I was like, I'm not, this isn't necessary. Was that?
Really good timing then.
Really good timing. But I was like, yeah, I mean, I definitely would like to, get in a little bit better shape. I'm not sure if I'm ready to run any Ironmans, but I guess let's start with talking about just, obviously you kind of address this in the book, but for people who are tuning in or who are going to listen to this later, just what really kind of got you to that place where you decided, you know what, I really need to get in shape, and not only that though, I want to start doing these types of marathons like the Ironman.
Well, wanting to get into shape was reaching my early 40s and not being in shape, being pretty overweight and unfit. I was 41 years old, and it was on a New Year's Day where I'd walked to the local pub with a load of friends. Local pub called the Goose and Cuckoo, which is a great real ale pub. My kids used to call it the Gruesome Cuckoo because I think they misheard it once and it's just a better name. And it was one of those New Year's days where I'd had too much to drink the night before. My wife and I said, right, this is it. New Year's Day resolution, no drink, good food. So by midday we were on the beer and the burgers. And I just thought to myself, I'm 41 and I'm feeling wretched and overweight and unfit, and I actually remember thinking to myself, it's too late now. I might just as well give up, because I always tried to do the fitness through my 20s, 30s. I'd run a bit, I'd gone to the gym, I played squash, the occasional bike ride for a few miles, but it was always, I'd always done exercise to get fit. But what changed when I decided then, 41, right, I need to try and get fit now. I committed to doing 3 Peaks Challenge with my friend Pete, from my local area. I hadn't seen him for a while, and he got fit. He'd dropped like loads of weight. I hadn't seen him for a few months. It was like, holy shit, Pete, what happened to you? And he said, I got fit. Those 3 words. And I said, well, how did you do it? And he said, I've just been running, and let's do the 3 Peaks together. And 3 Peaks Challenge in the UK, for those who don't know, is the highest mountain in Scotland, England, and Wales in 24 hours, including drive time between them. So there's no, it's not technical mountain climbing, but it's hard walking, getting up these mountains. So from that moment on, my efforts to lose weight and get fit had a final aim, which to start off with was the 3 Peaks. Whereas before, my efforts to get fit had been to get fit. So I think having an aim to get fit, something you aim to do, which is beyond your capabilities, gives you a target, and sometimes almost getting fitter and healthier as a side product. So if you decide, like, I went, I'll let you ask more questions in a minute. I could just ramble, but
no, that's okay.
Starting with the 3 Peaks, I was running and then got into biking and swimming. So my targets became bigger and bigger. So 3 Peaks we did. And then I started running. It was 5K race, 10K, half marathon, marathon. And then I got into triathlon, and it was so sprint triathlon, half Ironman, Ironman. And every time the things I was targeting was the end game for me. So my fitness efforts, being the end product is being a bit fitter and a bit healthier is almost a side product of what I love doing now, which is running up and down mountains doing Ironmans. So that's what changed, and that's what I sort of say to people if they said how did you do it and keep doing it. It's
So
not just to be fit. It's lots of people go to the gym 3 times a week, not to go to the gym but to get fit, and a lot of those people tend to drift off from it because they're not doing it for end purpose, if you get my sort of drift. Yeah.
right. I'm trying to remember. I remember you said that, I don't know if it wasn't one of the Ironmans. It was another one where you had broken away from one of your what was it? From one of your friends, and you were going, I think, down a trail, and it was dark. And
Oh yeah,
basically you realized that had you kept going, you probably would have fallen off a cliff.
I'd have died. That was the Three Peaks challenge. Yeah.
Oh, that
Yeah.
was the first one.
So yeah, so that we'd had like 30 hours without sleep, and I was on Snowdon, which is the biggest mountain in Wales. I love Snowdon. I've done it loads of times since in various races and just for fun with the family. But it's a proper mountain, so you can't rely on weather. It might look sunny when you start at the bottom, but you get to the top and it's hail and snow and mist. So it was terrible weather on Snowdon, and I didn't really understand. Surviving in mountains. I had the right kit on, but so I because it was during the sort of middle of the summer when you get hundreds and hundreds of people doing the Three Peaks. So there were lines of people going up and down the mountain. But coming down, I was a bit disorientated, and I still wore glasses for exercise. I use contacts now, but I had glasses on. They were steamed up. I couldn't see where I was going, and I lost the line of people. I ended up going off on another path, and between clouds, I saw the lakes down the bottom that I needed to get to. I said, "Oh, there are the lakes. I'll just climb down the side of the mountain." That's a stupid thing to do, off piste, off path, So I started climbing down, scrambling down. It was really steep, and something sort of clicked in my head. I thought, this is a bit stupid. So I went back up to the path and backtracked and found the proper way down, and then looked up and saw where I would have been coming down, and it was a sheer drop, and I'd have been, yeah. I think at the time Prince William was flying rescue helicopters in Snowdonia, so I might have been one of Prince William's customers. So I'm glad I wasn't. Yeah, you got to know what you're doing.
So you've done how many Ironmans now?
5.
Now, the first one, I remember when I was reading the first one, I actually, you had, I guess, once you cross that finish line, they announce your name and says you are an Ironman. And I remember, smiling when I got to that point. I was like, all right, good, good going, Tim, because I could tell just how excited, how amazed, I wouldn't say necessarily amazed, but just how how excited you were
Well, it was
to have done this. I mean, it was clearly this accomplishment, and you were just,
that was like a total focus for me, that first Ironman, training for it. I didn't look at much beyond that, life-wise, career-wise. It was just like focus. And that phrase, the announcer at the end, for virtually everyone across his line, sees the name on the number and says, "Tim, you are an Ironman." And anyone who's watching this, who's training for an Ironman, hasn't done one before, they'll be focused on that line. Somebody telling you you're an Ironman, because it's the first one is always the best in many ways, because it's beyond anything you've done before. It's a stupid distance race. It's ridiculous, really. There's actually a book called Not Normal Behavior, written by someone like me, a normal guy who's done an Ironman, and it really isn't normal. But yeah, when the announcer says that, it's a good moment. It's like a pivot point between before and after. Before you've done one, after you've done one. It's quite a big moment in your life, I think. It was for me anyway.
And then, so after that first one, you've now gone and done 4. So clearly there's something about that just really appeals to you. And can you just kind of explain real quick what the Ironman challenge really kind of entails?
Yeah, so it's open water swim, 2.4 mile swim, and then 112 mile bike ride, and then a marathon. and then you've got 17 hours to do all three. So you can take a rest between them if you want, but you're losing time. And that includes, toilet stops and food stops. So it's quite it's an undertaking, And some of the races I've done, the bike rides, it's 112 miles. It's a long way, but it's 8,000 to 10,000 feet of climbing as well. It's quite hilly, and the marathon, I don't call it a marathon, I call it an Ironman run. It's sort of, because you get off the bike and you think, oh, I'm nearly finished now. Only got an Ironman run to do, but it's 26 miles. But that's a psychological way of breaking it down really into something achievable. It's a bit stupid.
And I remember there was that one thing where you got like a penalty, but it wasn't supposed to be a penalty, and that somehow caused like you to lose some time, or
yeah, I was Ironman Wales, which is my local Ironman in Tenby. Amazing race, amazing support. Tenby is a lovely seaside town, and it's known as the Iron Town because it totally gives itself over to Ironman once a year. That was my third actually, and I was disqualified because I was given a penalty on the bike for like a minor indiscretion, and then you take a penalty back in transition, so you have to get back in transition and you stand in a penalty tent for 5 minutes. That's you lose 5 minutes. So I did that, but they didn't record me doing it, so they thought I didn't do it, so they disqualified me. And it took the shine off finishing. I finished and got my medal, but then the next day I realized I'd been disqualified. So it took me a week of lots of phone calls and emails and sending evidence that I'd taken the penalty, and they reinstated my time. So I am an official finisher now. But for that week, it wasn't very pleasant because I wanted to sort of wallow in the glow of finishing it, but I was chasing people who didn't want to talk to me, basically. Not fun.
And then for your 50th birthday, you went to Canada because they were having an Ironman, and so like that was what you wanted to do for your birthday, and your family was like, okay, sure.
They were eventually, So I figured, I saw that my 50th was on a Sunday, and Ironmans, the branded Ironmans are generally on a Sunday. So I thought somewhere in the world on my birthday there's going to be an Ironman, and there was one somewhere in the US. Might have been Lake Placid, Ironman Lake Placid, and there was one in Whistler in Canada, Ironman Canada. So I said to my wife, do you fancy going to Canada for my 50th? She said, yeah, that'd be nice. And then sort of a pregnant pause. And she said, is there an Ironman there? Yeah, there is. But, Tracy and Dan and Ed all came. We had we had a holiday of a lifetime surrounding the race, and we had such a great time. And they were there to support me, which it had been on every, all five Ironmans I've done. I've had family there supporting me, which is great and essential, really.
And so since then, have you, like, how long ago was that again, the one when you went to Canada?
My 50th, that was almost 2 years ago.
Almost 2 years ago. So that was right before COVID hit. So since then, you've not done an Ironman?
No, I've got another one this year.
But you do have one coming up.
Yeah, it's not, the one this year is not branded. So Ironman with a small I is like a race distance. Ironman with a capital I is a brand, right. Big money-making brand. So the one I'm doing this year is called The Brutal. I chose to do a race called The Brutal, which is just crazy. But it's so I'm revisiting Snowdon again, the mountain that I almost died on during the Three Peaks, because this one ends with a marathon up and down the mountain in Snowdonia. It's a great race. I've done it before. It's like 200 people do it. I know the organizer. It's a great bunch of people. It's and their main aim of the day is for you to finish. You have to do something really bad to get disqualified from that race. It's a great outfit. And
so throughout the book, you talk about cake, how you love cake. Specifically, what kind of cake are you talking about?
Oh, I couldn't name a favorite cake. That'd be like naming a favorite child. I don't know.
That's okay.
No, so I do a lot of bike rides with friends, training for races or just social rides, and invariably we end up in a cafe somewhere having a coffee and a cake. And it became a joke thing in the book. I do have a sweet tooth. I do love cake, and it's part of the reason why I do this sort of stuff. That I can eat cake and work it off. But yeah.
So then let's go to the book. So you've been doing this now for years and you finally decided, I want, well, first of all, have you been keeping a journal? Because there was a
So
lot of detailed stuff. And I kind of think about my own memory. I'm like, could I really remember a couple years ago if I were to do one of
well,
these things? I mean, I'm sure if it
yeah,
was like the very first Iron Man,
yeah,
that's certainly one of those events that stick with you. But the details in this are pretty vivid, I guess I should say.
yeah.
So
I guess online journal in a way. So for not for a few years now, but when I started doing stuff like this, I did a website called Run Walk Crawl where I do race reports and I talk about kit I was buying and races I was interested in doing, just kit reviews, things like that. Um, the website went dormant a few years ago when I just sort of trailed off into other things. But I've obviously got all the race reports I've written. So the 5 Ironmans I talk about in the book, the race reports are from the time. Hence the detail. I couldn't remember that sort of stuff now. Um, but doing the book was partly because I had a fair bit of material from the website anyway, and also I love. You might have gathered I enjoy talking about it, and I just figured I fancy doing something different writing wise. This was during lockdown actually when I decided I'd just spend some time, uh, yeah, writing up my experiences and trying to put it together in a book. And the reason I published, so it's self-published. My first paperback self-published. The reason I did that was I could have shopped it around to publishers, but I figured that during lockdown, which a lot of the world is still in now and just coming out of the other side, um, fitness became quite a thing during lockdown. I remember seeing, when Spain locked down, people in Barcelona and Madrid exercising on rooftops and things like that, and getting big speakers out and exercising with each other. I mean, it became a big thing, so I just thought I'd like to get it out there in the world now rather than wait like a year if a publisher even bought it.
And so, okay, so you kind of answered that question in terms of it's not like you sat down one day and decided, you know what, I'm gonna spend all my time writing this. So a lot of this had been written throughout the, however long you've been doing these Ironman or these different
Yeah.
marathons. So you kind of
But,
just collected all of those and put them together.
well, the race reports were written back in the time, but I think probably at least that amount in the at least the equivalent amount in the book was written during lockdown. And it's more, the race reports are of a moment, but the other chapters are right about where I train and why I do this sort of stuff. And cake, there's a chapter on cake, which I joked about, but I decided to do. That was all written, last year during lockdown.
Okay.
And
Um,
hopefully, there's at least a couple of guys who've been emailing me saying I'm starting running and I've lost weight. Yeah, I didn't, I don't want to say I wrote it to try and inspire people, but it seems to have sort of picked up. A few people have read it, and Rob, you told me you're 40 soon.
yes, I am. I'm not sure. I definitely would like to maybe, cut back on the cake. I'm not sure though. I'm at a place where I can do a marathon, although I wouldn't not necessarily rule it out.
No,
Um, All right, so let's switch gears then real quick. Speaking about lockdown, so obviously, things are kind of getting, a little bit back to normal, but for a while there, the world was one of those things that, I don't know, you're like your entire life. Had you ever thought that we would ever experience something, anything like that? I mean, you watch these movies, you watch these things that will like deal with pandemics, but to actually be in one is one of those things where even now it kind of just doesn't seem real.
no. Even last night, so my daughter and I went to the local pub last night for a couple of drinks, and so we saw the owners. Haven't seen them in like months and months and months. We know them. Even then, you still have this moment of, walking into a pub with a mask on just to use the toilet because you have to sit outside for a drink. It's just, yeah, that it was surreal, and I had moments of real existential angst, as everyone did. There was one moment during lockdown. Um, First lockdown here, the weather was gorgeous, and we spent it at home. Me, my wife, and our 2 kids who are young adults now. Um, actually thought I was remember sitting in the garden having a drink, thinking there could be an alien invasion tomorrow, and it wouldn't amaze me any more than what's happening now.
Yeah.
Yeah, alien invasion, sure, it could easily happen. Yeah, like you say, especially people like you and I, we write books about this sort of stuff, and you never really think it's gonna hit home.
So, speaking of that, so during lockdown, you had a release of Eden.
Yeah,
So this came out. let me see, when did this come out? I mean, at least
June,
right here it's saying it's April 2020. So
April.
that
Yeah,
was right at the, I guess, kind of the beginning of lockdown, or towards the start. So that
yeah,
was a time where all of a sudden bookstores were closed.
yeah.
So obviously, for many books, the only way that they sell is really being in the bookstores. Now,
Mm.
granted, with online, I mean, anybody can order a book, but still, I mean, how I mean, can you just kind of talk about that experience? I mean, I'm sure that was kind of deflating.
It was, yeah, because I think it's one of my best books, and my publisher and I, or my publisher, yeah, both of us together, I guess, have put a lot of effort behind promoting it. We had a blog tour put together. I was actually going to go on a signing tour of the UK, which was going to be my first ever proper signing tour, 5 or 6 days, but 7 or 8 venues. Um, with Christina Henry, actually, US writer. So we were due to go on tour together. So that was obviously cancelled. Yeah, it was deflating, and the book still did okay, but there was, I think it was a combination of, the last thing people want to do is read about um, horror novels when they're 1 month into a worldwide pandemic lockdown.
Well, can you tell us real
But
quick what Eden's about?
yeah, so it's not an apocalyptic novel, but it's a climate. My publisher called it a climate, uh, an eco thriller, I think they called it. So it's about a world where climate change has tipped over the we've reached a tipping point. It's sort of near future, but the countries have come together and created all these areas of virgin zones, which are vast areas given back to nature. Humans aren't allowed there, so these places are abandoned and given back to nature and intended to become the sort of lungs of the world to save the planet, save nature and the planet and us. But even though people aren't allowed in these areas, they're not even scientific. They're not nature reserves. They're not a scientific experiment. They're just abandoned. But people like adventure races, like the challenge of running from one side of these places to another and to be the first team to do it. So one team goes into Eden, a team of adventure racers goes into Eden, which is the first and largest zone. And they find that nature's become quite sort of elevated there and doesn't welcome humanity, and stuff goes down. And it's a horror novel. It's a horror eco thriller, but it touches on the what I love doing, running around the countryside and survival stuff, and also climate and eco concern, which is definitely drifting into my work a lot more lately.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, like, I think I mentioned before, obviously you write in so many different genres. You came up more
Yeah,
horror and fantasy, and you stuck around those, but for a while you did dabble into thrillers.
yeah,
With two novels, if I remember correctly, the Hunt, and then the other one was Family Man.
Family Man. That's it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, but those were exclusively in the UK. They were published by
Mhm.
what, Avon?
Avon. Yeah.
And then are they going to be available anywhere else at this point? Because I think they're out of print, right?
They're out of print with Avon, I think. There's no plans to publish them elsewhere. I'd love to. I'd like to continue writing them, but as sometimes happens, they didn't do quite as well as I'd hoped. Even though
Mhm.
I actually think they're really good books. I mean, the Hunt's come very close to being a movie and very close to being a TV series, and we're still ticking over with it. So I'm really hopeful that's going to hit the screen at some point. Um,
Yeah.
and the Family Man, I think, is a great story, but because it's sort of linked to the Hunt tangentially. There's a couple of characters that are the same. It's difficult for us to shop one book around without the other.
Right.
So yeah, I like, and the book I'm working on now. I'm just started a new novel just a couple of weeks ago. It's a very dark thriller in the same vein as those two, really, with more supernatural undertones. But it's still like, I put it out there as a thriller more than anything else, really.
So, I know a lot of writers, and you're one who is very prolific, I would say.
Yeah.
How many books do you say on average you've been writing a year? And on top of that, have you found that last year was difficult to be, to just be creative and to kind of stay focused, or was it actually more helpful to just, be at home?
Yeah, well, even before lockdown, I decided that the novel I was going to write last year, I was going to do longhand, and I'd never done that before, and my handwriting's terrible. But I just decided I blame Rio Ewers, good mate of mine, but a little bastard because he always writes longhand, and he swears by it. So I'm going to try what Rio does. So I wrote a whole novel longhand during lockdown. Mistake I made. I mean, Rio writes, so he'll write in the morning or the afternoon, and then he'll transcribe what he's written. I said, no, I'm just going to write the whole novel in notebooks and then type it up. And that was a that was a long task. I it did lockdown. I think lockdown did affect me creatively a little bit. Um, I didn't write quite as much as I usually do. Usually, I'll do 2 novels a year, sometimes 2.5. If I collaborate with Chris and I have written 8 novels together now. So probably 2 novels a year, I guess, 2 to 2.5 novels a year, and novellas. And I'm doing a lot more screen development stuff over the last year or two.
So do you find the novels that you've been writing in the past year that you somehow have to address the pandemic in a way? Like, I mean, it's one thing when sometimes something happens, like, nowadays you'll read, for me, primarily now I read, I'm writing thriller books. So
Yeah,
certain stuff, is part of that world, like, 9/11,
yeah,
it might get mentioned or whatever else, like, that is a part of the world where now the pandemic wasn't just like a blip. I mean, this was something that you kind of feel, because at least on my end, I started writing a novel last year, and basically it was going to take place after, the pandemic, so it addressed it.
mm,
And I just, for some reason, I just couldn't get, I don't know if it was just because of that or whatever else, but I ended up going back to my agent and kind of saying, you know what, I want to write a completely different book.
yeah,
And this is a novel that I just kind of wrapped up recently. It doesn't even mention the pandemic.
mm,
You know what I mean? Like, it kind of just acts like it never even existed. And
yeah.
for some reason, it was just a little bit easier for me to kind of get through. I don't know why. Maybe
That's
psychologically.
Yeah, it's really interesting that I've read a couple of novels lately, to Blurb, I think, that have addressed it, but it's very tangential. It's very, it's not part of the plot or the story. It's just, oh yeah, and we don't need to wear masks anymore, that sort of thing. So it's set a couple of years from now, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, Nothing I've written. I've written a couple of short stories. I wrote a short story during lockdown called Revelation, which was completely not intended to be a lockdown story, but by the time I finished it, it was a total lockdown, total COVID story. Um, and I've written a couple of other things, yeah, but which sort of touch on it. But it is interesting. It's going to be interesting to see books come out over the next few years. How many of them, you know, you you can't write a thriller where all characters wearing masks, I guess.
No. Yeah,
Interesting.
you could, you could, but I mean, with publishing schedules, ideally when it comes out, it's going to be a couple years. Did you
Yeah.
see during sometime last year there was some like viral Amazon review that had been kind of going around,
Right.
where some reader was complaining because the author did not really take into a consideration there might be a worldwide pandemic, because the
Oh,
book
too
took place in 2020 and there was
yeah.
no mention of a pandemic, and so 1 star.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. If there had been, that author would have been a genius. Written 4 years ago or 3 years ago. Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
you
think it'll be interesting. There won't be a flood of books about the pandemic, but I think there'll be a lot of writers addressing the fact that it happened, which
Yeah.
will be quite interesting. I don't know why I find it the books I've read, I sort of found it a little bit jarring, and that's maybe because we're still in the depths of it.
Well,
I
I mean,
don't
I
know.
remember, I mean, I guess this is more because, obviously I'm an American. So I remember that like after 9/11, books or stories that like use that
Yeah,
always very, I remember, I think, it was this huge deal when a novel what like first came out that actually addressed it.
yeah, yeah.
Because, and now, it's mentioned a lot of times, again, in thrillers or whatever else. But Yeah, no, I mean, it would make sense that, to just kind of, but I mean, it's become part of life, and it kind of feels like something that has to be addressed in some way.
Yeah,
Um, I don't know. It'll be curious to see, yeah, the novels coming out in the next couple of years, how many deal with it and how many just kind of just go on, because, at the same time too, with what we do, we're writing books for people to escape. So a lot of times people
yeah,
don't want to be reminded of, a
yeah.
shit
That's
year.
true. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, hadn't. I mean, the novel I'm writing now, I haven't even thought about uh, whether it's pre or post COVID, or even in a world where COVID happened. I mean, it's a thriller, but I think usually when I write something like that, I don't place it time wise in my head. It's like it's nowish,
Yeah.
but I only include parts of nowish that are relevant to the plot in a way. So I won't be writing about two characters driving down the street after a heist, noticing somebody wearing a mask, because it's not relevant to the story really.
Right.
Or but maybe there could be interesting things like they go into the bank they're going to rob, and somebody says, "Get out! You haven't got a mask on," and it's like, "Oh shit!" Now I've been noticed. Yeah, I remember going into the first time I went into my local bank. This was during the first wave last summer when the bank opened up again. Went in a mask, and I'm sure I thought I was hysterical, but probably the 80th person to say to the woman behind the counter, I bet you never thought you'd be working in a bank and everyone wears a mask. Yeah, she went, huh, yeah.
So you mentioned before about the, obviously, The Hunt might be made into a movie or TV show one of these days, hopefully, fingers crossed. But you've had two stories turned into movies,
Yeah,
which for any writer, I mean, even getting something optioned is a big deal. The fact that you've had two movies made, the one was based on a short story or novella, so Pay the Ghost,
mm,
and that was turned into a Nicolas Cage movie. And Nicolas Cage has made hit and miss movies, but still, it's Nicolas Cage. So it's
oh
just great. I
yeah,
mean, everyone knows Nicolas Cage.
sure.
So it was actually funny. The other night, my wife and I watched that Willy's Wonderland. I don't know if
Right.
you've seen it,
No.
but it's Nicolas Cage, which, I mean, I don't know if it's really giving anything away, but literally Nicolas Cage does not speak one word of dialogue in the entire
Oh,
movie.
right. Okay, I
But
bet.
he's just going into it's basically he's stuck in a Chuck E. Cheese, or I don't know if there's anything equivalent in the UK version of it. It's just, it's like a kid's amusement. And basically there's like that, they're demonic creatures that come to life and they have to eat it anyway. But I remember after watching it, I was like, you know what? And I remember we watched the trailer
Mm,
for Pay the Ghost, because I was like, a friend of mine, he had this movie turned into and so that was the first one that came out, and then you had The Silence.
yeah.
So can you just kind of talk briefly about just the experience of, I mean, I'm assuming you didn't really have that much involvement in terms of the movies. There was no, like, you weren't writing the scripts or really producing any of them, right? I mean, so like, what was that like, just kind of being on the outside where they would call you up one day and being like, we have interest, and then the one day where you were like, okay, it's a green light.
Yeah, I've like you say, I've been lucky enough to have two made, and quite a few. I've signed loads of option deals, and that every single processes I found is different. So Pay the Ghost didn't have anything to do with it really. That was a one man band producer who optioned it and developed the script. He was, I got on really well with him. That all went away, went quiet, and then suddenly a bigger production company took it on, and Nicolas Cage was attached, and it was made. But I had absolutely nothing to do with, I didn't go to set, I didn't get to meet Cage or anything like that. It's a okay horror movie. It's out every Halloween. It's on Horror Channel or on TV. It's going to be there forever. The Silence was a very different experience. I was much more heavily involved with that. My manager in LA sort of worked with the producers and the film company and the screenwriters to get it together. I was involved in, I sort of got really friendly with John Leonetti, the director. So I was involved with, I wasn't officially a writer on the scripts. I didn't do any writing, but I saw lots of pages and sort of talked problems through and things like that. And they got me to set, like you say, I was a bloody corpse, which took like 4 hours to film, and it was in the movie for literally half a second. But I acted my ass off. with Stanley Tucci bloody all over the floor. It was great fun. And The Silence was just such a great experience. And I've been told by people in the know who've had stuff done or haven't, whatever, that I had the perfect movie experience with The Silence. And it was great. You know, saw it. My wife and I were in LA 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago, at a screening at Netflix. And it was just a wonderful experience. Dream come true.
So was that always going to be a Netflix movie, or did Netflix end up buying it? You know what I mean?
Netflix bought it. It was with oh damn, do you know what? I can't remember the name of the. It was with a distributor that went bust, I believe, or had problems, and Netflix bought it up. And yeah, it's known as a Netflix movie now, but the history's open and available, and it was going to be in the theaters, but then something went wrong somewhere, as things often do.
I mean, the great thing about
Netflix, I think it turned out better. I'm glad it was on Netflix. I'd have loved to have seen it in the theaters on the big screen. Well, I did see it on the big screen at Netflix, but I'm one of the few people who saw it on a big screen. But the fact it was on Netflix means so many more people got to see it. I mean, the numbers, I can't share the numbers because I'm not allowed to, but it was phenomenal. The amount of people who saw that film is mind-boggling.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, the great thing about Netflix is it's every country. I mean,
Yeah.
God, I'm sure millions of people saw it. So, did you notice a spike in book sales around the time for The Silence?
A little, not massive. You know, there was a tie-in edition out. But yeah, we saw, a lot of people. So it was talked about a lot. Pre-release, it was talked about a lot because of the sort of similarities with another movie that was out at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
A Quiet Place, which a lot of people have mentioned. So there was
to be clear, though, for everybody noting, is that your book was written and published way before that one came out.
Yeah. And we were in development, as far as I understand it, first, and the script was written first. And it's just one of these instances where, an idea floats around on the zeitgeist, and it happens with movies quite often that a similar sort of idea percolates at the same time. The movies come out at the same time. So there was a lot of talk about that. When the Silence trailer hit, the instant buzz all over the net was a busy time for me, because it was like anyone talking about it was, oh my God, this looks just like that movie, A Quiet Place. But then every time that was mentioned, somebody who read the novel, or somebody who knew me, or somebody in our sort of horror circle would jump on and say, no, Lebbon wrote the novel in 2015. So the novel was being talked about an awful lot, which was good. So it did produce a sort of a spike in sales. Not, I'd liked it to sold more, but it's still, possibly because of the movie, it's still the novel people talk about if they contact me, or if, the bar guy at the pub last night had seen it. Oh my God, you read The Silence? Yeah, cool. So I tried to sell him a book, but he didn't read.
I think when I went to a Barnes and Noble, they'll have a little like table set up of books to Netflix, and I'm pretty sure yours is included in that. So
yeah, it's often
yeah. No, that's fantastic. So you said you're working on a novel right now. Any new tie-ins coming up that you can tell us about, or is those
no tie-ins on the horizon at the moment? I mean, haven't the last one I did was Firefly, which was out.
And how do you approach? I know I know this wasn't something that we were going to get into, but I'm just curious now. Like, how do you kind of approach those tie-ins? I mean, do you have how much creative reign do you have?
So every property, most of the tie-ins I've done have been for Titan, but each licensed property, the approach you get and the freedom you get is different. Generally, I've had the sort of the most troublesome editing experience has probably been Firefly, and that's probably because I saw Firefly years ago when it was out and enjoyed it, but I'm not a brown coat, which is what they call themselves. I'm not like a massive dedicated Firefly fan. So I think I went into that, and I probably should have studied the show a bit more. But stuff like Star Wars and Alien, certainly the Alien books, the Alien trilogy, I did Alien Predator trilogy, just all my characters, all my story, just using a couple of beasties that already exist. So the freedom, even in my Star Wars novel, I was given almost complete freedom other than not being able to blow up planets that they wanted to use. So I had to create my own planets if I wanted to blow them up. So,
Right.
you know, I've when I started doing tie-ins, I thought, oh shit, this is going to be like, I'm going to have to read 45 Star Wars novels to make sure I get it all right. But it was actually, generally it's pretty good. Novelizations are a bit different, obviously. Like if you sent a screenplay to turn into a novel, I learned with my first one that you generally need to use all the dialogue that's in the screenplay, but you can add more in, but you can't take stuff out.
Right.
That's the usual thing with novelizations.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So, speaking of which, now that I think about it, you had an Alien thing on that was an Audible original, right?
Yeah, that was so my first. I've written 4 Alien novels. The first one was a pure Alien novel, Out of the Shadows, which was Fox had the idea of a trilogy, which me, Chris Golden, and Jim Moore wrote. Mine was the first novel. Really sort of loosely connected trilogy. My first novel was set between Alien and Aliens with Ripley. So obviously there's a big problem there, because in Aliens, Ripley doesn't remember having another alien adventure, but she does in my novel. Okay. So, but I thought that's a big problem and the fans aren't going to like that, but I get the chance to write a Ripley novel. This was like a dream job for me. I'd wanted to write an alien novel for 15 years. I almost did one like 12 years ago with Dark Horse, but they ended their line or something. So it was a dream come true. Oh yeah, audio. So yeah, I wrote Out of the Shadows, and then Dirk Maggs, who's a great friend and you know, superb audiobook producer and director, got to do he wrote the adaptation and directed it with Rutger Hauer was in it. My God, amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I'm
So,
hoping to work with Dirk on other stuff. We're talking about a few other things, but he's a busy man at the moment. He's doing Sandman at the moment, I believe. So yeah.
um, so I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I don't think I have anything else on my notes. Anything you want to talk about?
No, I'm
Anything you want to
good.
get off your chest?
So what are you working on at the moment?
What
You
am I
should,
working on now?
yeah,
Just
talk about your stuff.
just wrapped up on a well, I mean, I have last year, was it last year? No, 2 years ago, 2019. So we talked about the pandemic. So I had written a novel that basically we sent out, my agent and I shopped out under a pen name because it's a little bit different. It's more like kind of suspense, more
Yeah.
female oriented. So we ended up having some offers and ended up going with Amazon Publishing just because they had offered,
Yeah.
it was a much better offer.
Cool.
But it was one of those things too that, when the book came out, it came out in September of 2020.
Right. Yeah.
So it was one of those things where I remember even leading up to it being like, oh my God, like I can't even imagine, having this book having to come out,
Mm.
with publishing the bookstores. Like I felt bad for all these authors who had some of these books that even were pushed back. I remember like the release
Oh yeah.
dates
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
pushed back. So that one, it worked out. It was Kindle first reads. It sold a lot of copies. Actually just got word the other day it hit over 500, or I'm sorry, 50,000 readers.
Wow. That's
So
good.
it was like a really cool milestone on that.
Yeah.
So the second book in the contract comes out in August.
Oh, cool.
And I have something kind of coming out actually next week, actually this upcoming week,
Right.
on Audible for it. Haven't really officially announced it yet. So for the
Right.
2 or 3 people who might be watching this, that's a little bit of a thing. So, and then I just
Fantastic.
was reading, working on a thriller that would be shopped around under my own name because it's, much more. Well, you did the same thing with the books that you had published. They were kind of, they were out. I mean, it was the same last name, but it was a little bit of a pseudonym in a way.
TJ Lebbon. Yeah. Nobody could see through that one. I was just, because at the same time I was publishing horror novels with Titan, I think, at the time, and it was just the editors just wanted to slightly distinguish the books. But yeah, it's I've never written under a pseudonym, but it's something I've thought about for various reasons, and it's something I'll probably do at some point. But yeah, it could be interesting doing that. Yeah.
So, well, Tim, I appreciate all your time.
Yeah, sure.
This
Been
was
really good.
great. I want to thank everybody, and everybody go to Amazon or go to your favorite bookstore. Run Walk Crawl is only on Amazon though, right?
Yeah, it's Amazon paperback and ebook. Yeah, so
Paperback and ebook.
you can't get it in the bookshops, but yeah,
And actually, let's talk real quick because I think we have some more time.
yeah, we're good.
The first time, I don't know. I mean, so the first time I had contact with you, God, how long has it been now? Over 20 years.
Yeah, easy.
I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
it's been, and I don't even remember exactly the very first time, but I remember that you were very, very kind because you had read a very early draft of one of my first novels and actually provided a quote before anything,
yeah.
ever
Which
happened with
novel
it.
was it? Which novel
Uh,
was?
it was The Calling.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, of
Which
course.
is which in terms of one of my early novels that are horror actually still does really well. So I mean, it was, you were very kind with that. In fact, I remember, even this was back during the leisure days, you were even willing to talk to Don
Yeah, I think I did. Yeah,
Gloria on my behalf. And I think at that point I was looking around for an agent. And I was like, well, maybe hold off. I don't know. It was one of those things I always look back and be like, well, man, what would have happened had I let Tim, but I mean, it was just the kindness of you to be like, yeah, yeah, we'll help out. So
good
I don't
book.
know. It's just been
I've
very
still got it
nice.
here. Yeah,
Well, yeah.
I've still got it here somewhere.
Oh, wow. Oh,
Yeah,
well, you know what? You probably got there was actually a newer cover, which I'll have to send you an updated one. So,
right.
but
Okay,
anyway,
cool.
and then I remember we talked a couple years back. We've had stuff online, on social media or whatever else. But I remember last time we actually talked like this was on Skype, I think, when you were kind of working on getting some of your own self-publishing, some of your own like short stories and novellas.
Yeah, yeah. I've got a bunch of them on Amazon. Probably. I mean, White, the short story, the novella White, um, is on Amazon, and Pay the Ghost, and a couple of novels I've got the rights back to, but it's mainly novellas. Probably about a dozen, 8, 8, 10, 12 books I've got up there. Yeah, and you helped
And
me with the whole. It's easy enough to use whatever I use, Vellum, to turn it to develop an ebook. Which
I can tell based on this, you used
oh,
Vellum for
yeah,
this.
yeah. It's I mean,
Very easy.
it's idiot proof. I'm an idiot when it comes to technology, and I found it worked really well, and the book turned out great, I think. Yeah, and you helped me with the whole, how the hell do I promote these things, and which I'm still not very good at. They tick over, one promotes the other, but
Well, you know what? It's all backlist. It's all
yeah,
gravy.
yeah, yeah,
So, all right. So we got this book that just came out recently. Everyone go buy a copy. And of course, Eden and, the 50 some other books of Tim's go because, he has a family to feed. So,
dude.
all right. So Tim, I appreciate all your time.
Yeah,
And again,
right.
everybody go check out Tim's stuff then. All right. Have a
Thanks,
great
Rob.
day. Bye.
Great talking.
Oops.